In this video, we're going to cover XBSX 2.0 install and setup. The Xbox Series X and S make for a great platform to emulate PS2 on. The power behind the CPUs in these systems is good enough to handle a vast majority of PS2 games, and you're able to enjoy things like HD texture packs, widescreen patches, 60 FPS patches, as well as local and online multiplayer. And in this video, I'm hoping to cover most of those basics, so this is going to be a long one. So let's go ahead and dive in. So to get started with emulating PS2 on your Xbox Series X or S, you're going to need a couple of things, the first of which being an Xbox S or X. The CPU inside Xbox One systems isn't the greatest for PS2 emulation, and while there will be a couple of games that will work without issue, an overwhelming majority of the PS2 library is going to be a stutterfest. So while you can install XBSX 2.0 on an Xbox One, I just really don't recommend wasting your time. And the next thing you're going to need is to get your Xbox registered and activated for developer mode. So I'm not going to repeat the steps for that process here. They are found in my dev mode and RetroArch install guide. So if you have yet to activate your Xbox in dev mode, a link to this video will be in the description below inside my emulation on Xbox Series X and S playlist. You are also going to need to have a properly formatted USB drive, so the steps are covered inside the initial setup video as well, but if you would like to watch a dedicated USB drive video, they are still available within my Xbox emulation playlist, so link to the playlist will be in the description below. Make sure you don't skip out on properly formatting a USB drive, otherwise you will encounter issues later. And as an additional note, if you are planning on running HD texture packs, I do recommend getting an external SSD or a faster USB thumb drive. Mechanical hard drives just aren't fast enough to do HD texture packs at real time. You'll notice a lot of texture pop-ins or missing textures to begin with. So getting something like the Crucial X6 here, which is what I use in all of my Xbox Series X and S videos, has worked like a charm. But from here, go ahead and get your Xbox booted up into dev mode and brought to the dev mode home screen that looks something like this. And make sure that you got everything on dev mode set up as shown in that original RetroArch setup guide that I mentioned earlier, so that way you're connected to the internet and you have your remote access panel ready to go. So now we're going to go ahead and download XBSX 2.0's latest version from the Xbox Dev Store. So link to the Dev Store will be in the description below. And then you can just scroll down to the emulator section here, and this is going to be a bit confusing because we still have the older versions of XBSX 2.0 listed here, but the one we're looking for has a more PlayStation-inspired logo, and it says latest. So as of making this video, it is XBSX version 2.0.8. I don't know what this is going to change to over the next few months, so just find the one that says latest. And there'll be a green download button here, so go ahead and click on this, and tell it to download from here. Now, if for any reason this download doesn't work, it stops at any weird number of percentage, you can just click on the download button, and tell it to download from GitHub instead. And then you can download the latest release, as well as the dependency file. So just download both of those. Once you have the latest version of XBSX 2.0 downloaded, just go ahead and get it extracted. That is if you did the download here option. If you downloaded it directly from GitHub, it's already good to go. You don't need to extract anything. But anyway, inside the folder, you will see the XBSX 2.0 AppX, and then a folder labeled dependencies, and under the x64 folder, there's the ones we need. But now make note of the remote access IP address on your Xbox dev mode home screen, because you're going to need to type this into a web browser to bring up your Xbox device portal to get XBSX 2.0 installed. So go ahead and type it in now and open up the Xbox dev portal. Once on the home screen of your Xbox device portal, under My Games and Apps, click on Add. Now you can drag your XBSX 2.0 app into this little box here. Or you can click on Choose File, navigate to the directory where you have XBSX 2.0 located and select it. Now click on Next, and we're going to do the same thing with the dependency file. You can drag it into this little box or click on Choose File. And if you chose the Download Here option on the Xbox Dev Store, it's located under Dependencies, x64. There they go. Now, if for whatever reason they don't show up in this little box, just go ahead and refresh your web browser and start the process over again. And there they go. So if they don't show up, refresh your web browser or switch over to Edge if you're not already using it. But go ahead and click on Start to begin the installation. And once finished, click on Done, and we are now done with the Xbox device portal. Now back over on your Xbox, navigate down to where you see XBSX 2.0, press the View button, Select button, Back button, whatever you want to call it, go down to View Details, and change the UWP type from App to Game. And I like to do a console restart after doing that, so you can choose to do so now if you want to. And once the console has restarted, you can verify that it is set to a game by going back in, View Details, and there we go, good to go. And with that, XBSX 2.0 is now installed, but we still need to get a number of things set up to have it actually work. So we are going to go ahead and get our BIOS files set up now. So back over on your computer, go ahead and get your Xbox USB drive hooked up and opened up. And if you use the Xbox Media tool, you'll have the following folders available. So if you want to use this BIOS folder to store your XBSX 2.0 PS2 BIOS files, that's fine. But personally, I like to make a separate subdirectory specifically for XBSX 2.0. So I'm just going to create a new folder in here and name it XBSX 2.0. I want these capped. There we go. And inside, I'm going to create a number of new folders. So I actually have a list here of everything that we're going to point to USB under the XBSX 2.0 directory settings. So I'm just going to go ahead and create all of these folders now. So first and most important of which being BIOS and memory cards, but everything else is also going to be of use. So just going to make these folders now. And there we go. So we will be pointing all of our XBSX 2.0 directories into these subfolders in just a moment. But again, we're going to get started with the BIOS files. So I'm just going to open this folder up. Now you are going to need to source a PS2 BIOS file for yourself. Do not ask me for illegal download links as I will never provide them. But over on my channel, I do have 3 methods of getting a PS2 BIOS file that works with XBSX 2.0 if you would like to follow them. So if you have a PS2 Fat, PS2 Slim, or if you don't even happen to have a PlayStation 2 system anymore, you can actually dump a BIOS file from PS3 firmware using RPCS3, so I have another video showing you that process as well. So all 3 videos are going to be linked in the description below, and you're able to obtain a PS2 BIOS file from them. Otherwise, again, you can resort to Google, but you just have to source a PS2 BIOS file for yourself and make sure it's a good one because this is what screws over a lot of people. But anyway, so I have the PS2 BIOS file from my Slim, as well as my Fat right here. I only need one of these. And so PS2 BIOS files can either be in divided files like this, or they could be merged into a single file. Either should work. But I'm going to go ahead and copy my PS2 Fat's BIOS file in here. I don't need more than one, but if you are using that PS3 emulated BIOS file that I just showed you was possible to get, it needs to be named ps3_ps2_emu_bios.bin, and as you can see, this is a single file, and it just goes in like that as well. It just goes right in. So again, just source a PS2 BIOS file, put it in your BIOS folder, and either format will work just fine, as long as it is a good BIOS dump. But we're going to go ahead and set our BIOS directory in XBSX 2.0 and confirm that it works before moving on. So go ahead and get your USB drive hooked back up to your Xbox. Once the drive has been detected, go ahead and launch into XBSX 2.0. And you should be brought to a screen that looks something like this. So go ahead and head over to Settings. Now press right bumper to go to your BIOS settings screen, and we're going to change the search directory over to our USB drive. So click on Parent Directory till you get to your directory listing here. Head down to E for your USB drive, and now navigate to where you have those BIOS files stored. So again, I put mine under XBSX 2.0 BIOS. Now tell it to use this directory. And you could just leave this set to automatic, but if you do have different BIOS files in your folder, you can select them here. So again, this is from my PS2 FAT, and then this one right here is from the PS3. Now it is worth mentioning that if you plan on using this PS3 BIOS, you do need to have fast boot enabled, otherwise it will not work. For a console BIOS, you could disable this if you want to have the original PS2 boot animation play, but if you'd like to have region-free emulation, it is good to leave fast boot on regardless. But either way, if you're able to see your BIOS files in this selection menu, you know you're good to go. If you can't see them, the BIOS file might be problematic or you don't have your drive set up correctly. But we're also going to take this opportunity to go ahead and change the rest of our XBSX 2.0 directories. So pressing right bumper until you go all the way over to this little folder icon in the top right, we're going to go ahead and change things over. So just go ahead and select one of the options and click on Parent Directory. And again, go to your E drive, XBSX 2.0 folder, and select the appropriate folder that you have created for it and tell it to use this directory. I don't move the cache directory, I like leaving that on the internal drive. But just repeat the process for all of the folders. So select it, tell it to use this directory. And again, just repeat all the way down the line. Now once all your directories have been moved over, let's go ahead and move back over to the memory card folder over here. So left bumper until you get to the memory card folder. And we're going to change the memory card directory over to USB as well, so that way we never have to worry about losing our save files. And there we go. And once everything has been changed over, I like to go ahead and quit out of XBSX 2.0 and restart it. Head back into settings and make sure that all of the directory changes have taken effect, which they have. Perfect. So what I like to do now is create a new memory card for slot 1 that is in folder formats. That way you never have to worry about running out of save space on PS2 games. And then slot 2 I leave enabled as just a standard memory card file for any network settings that might crash. So anyway, under memory card settings, create memory card. Gonna tell it to be a folder, and then we could give it a name. So I'm just going to name it PS2 main because why not? Perfect. And then tell it to create. So now under slot 1, eject the current card, and then we're going to choose PS2 main.ps2 folder. And again, for slot 2, we could just leave this exactly how it is, but if you would like to make a dedicated memory card with a different name, you could do so as well. But with that, initial XBSX 2.0 settings are ready to go, so let's go ahead and get some games on this USB and show you some gameplay. So just going to go ahead and exit out of the application. And now I'm going to take the USB drive out and put it back on the computer. So you are going to need to source your own PS2 games, just like the BIOS file. Illegal downlinks are not going to be provided, but if you happen to have a large physical collection of PS2 games, I do have 2 videos on the channel on how to dump them to use on original PS2 hardware or through emulation such as XBSX 2.0. So both of these videos will be linked in the description below for you to use. Otherwise, you could just source them yourself, but again, illegal download links are not provided on this channel. Once you source your PS2 games, there are a number of different formats they could be in. So the standard format is either going to be .iso or .bin. So .bin files are for CD-based PS2 games and .iso are for DVD-based games. These can be converted into a number of different formats that work with XBSX 2.0. It's the same file types that work on PCSX2 on PC. So your standard ones, CISO or CHUD, are going to work just fine. So as you can see, I have converted a number of mine to CHUD, but we've kept a couple of standard ISO files in the bin file just for demonstration. But once you have your games, you just need to add them to your games folder on your Xbox USB drive. So if you use the Xbox Media Tool, you already have a preset number of made folders. So we're just going to add these into our PlayStation 2 folder here. And we're just going to wait for it to do its thing. And there we go, all copied over. But now you can take the opportunity to add cover art to these game files if desired. So if we open up a separate tab here, under our XBSX 2.0 folder, covers folder, we just need to add in an image file that matches the game file name of our game. So one of the easiest methods I like to use to get game art quickly without much fuss is to head over to GameFAQs, look up the game in question, and then under their media section there's a boxes segment, and it has the box art for different regions and variants of the game. So for example, 007 Nightfire here. Just going to right click on this image, tell it to save as, and then I'm going to put it on my desktop temporarily. So again, it just needs to be named the same as the game file. So we're just going to copy the name of the game file and rename 007's artwork here and then put it in our covers folder. Now for multi-disc games, I want to give you a quick example. So for example, Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. It had 2 discs for its normal release, but if you had the limited edition, there was a 3rd bonus disc. So I'm going to go ahead and download or save the image for both of these right here. There we go. And so we need to make 2 copies of this file, essentially. So just going to go ahead and do disk 1 first. Gonna drag that in, and now I'm gonna rename it for disk 2. Drag that in, and then for disk 3, I'm gonna use that red cover art to signify the limited edition. And there we go. So now for each of my discs, disk 1, disk 2 will show this normal cover art, and then disk 3 will show the limited edition box. But now you could just go through and repeat the same process for all of your game files if you want them to have proper cover art. If you don't care about this, you can skip this step entirely. But go ahead and take the USB drive out of your PC and move it back over to your Xbox when finished. But now back over on the Xbox, we're going to open up XBSX 2.0. And under Games List, press your menu button, start button, whatever you decide to call it these days. And we're going to add a search directory for our PS2 games. So click on Parent Directory till you get to the root directory. Now click on E for your USB drive. And then navigate to the directory where your PS2 games are stored. So again, I had mine under Games and then Sony PlayStation 2. Now we're going to tell it to use this directory. Now we could change up default settings here as well. So there's the default view option. You can have it be a games list or a game grid. You can sort by type, title. I like using title. You can invert the listing. But go ahead and tell it to scan for new games. And then just go ahead and press B when it is completed. And your game list will show up here with all of the games found in the directory. And if you chose to add any cover art, it will be displayed instead of the generic button. So now from here, I wanted to take you straight into a gameplay demo, but unfortunately, Player 1 controls are not automatically mapped on this version of XBSX 2.0. So we're going to have to do that before we can actually play a game. So by backing out of the games list, heading into settings, go over to the controller tab by pressing right bumper. If you scroll down to controller port 1, you'll see controller type option here. Just leave this set to DualShock 2. But other options are available like the guitar controller or pop music. So if you want to play guitar games, you can technically map that to your controller. But anyway, under automatic mappings, if you press A, you can now choose your Xbox controller to automatically map. So I have 3 Xbox controllers hooked up right now to do a multiplayer demonstration for all of you. But player 1 is always going to be the 0, player 2 is going to be the number 1, and player 3 is going to be number 2, and player 4 is going to be the number 3. So I'm going to automatically map my player 1 controls, and it maps them 1-to-1 with PlayStation 2 controllers. So as you can see, it's now all good to go. If you would like to make custom profiles, you can do so just by selecting a button and changing it by pressing the button on your controller that you would like it to be. and then you can head up and save the profile, and then you can load profiles at any point. But you could also set things like macros and other functions with the available options here. But anyway, if we scroll past the macros, we also have some nice stick inversions, sensitivities, as well as dead zone functions. But under controller port 2, you are able to set this up to be used in multiplayer by turning this to controller type DualShock 2. And then again, under automatic mapping, change this over to the Xbox controller number 1, so for the controller that is registered as player 2. And you'll see that now all the functions are available for player 2. And then player 2 has all the same options available for macros, stick sensitivities, and inverting sticks. Now, depending on the game you are going to play, you can enable a multi-tap on port 1 or port 2. But enabling the multi-tap will give you options for controller port 1A, so player 1. And then you can add controllers for port B, which is player 2. So again, just turn on the controller by choosing DualShock 2, and then you can add the automatic button mappings. And then for the controller port in port C is player 3 here. So again, turn on by pressing DualShock 2. And then the automatic button mappings, change those over to player 3. So there we go. We now have 3 controllers ready to go for multiplayer purposes. And if we had a 4th one, we could set that up as well, but I don't have one right now. But once you have your controls set up, you'll also want to set up a menu combo hotkey. So by pressing right bumper, you'll be brought to the hotkey selection here. And unfortunately, again, nothing is set to work on the Xbox controller by default like with previous versions of XBSX 2.0. So a bit unfortunate, but that's okay. So we could just go through and change up all our hotkeys here. So again, we want to be able to open up our pause menu. So go ahead and select a hotkey for this, choose whatever you want, but just select it with A and then put in the combo that you wish to use. So I'm doing right stick, left stick. So that's the only one we technically need, but if you want to set up other ones, you could do so now. So for example, add in fast forward. I recommend doing 2 buttons at once, otherwise things can get funky and interfere with gameplay. So for example, fast forward, I'm going to select this to select and right trigger. But there are a crap ton of hotkeys you can set. So again, just go through and change them to whatever you would like. I really don't use a lot of hotkeys, but there are some really useful ones. So for example, changing to software renderer without having to go into the menu. That could be really nice. So I'm going to set a hotkey for this. Make that back and left trigger. And then toggle texture replacements. I'm going to use this later in the video, so I want to set one for this. We're going to change this one to back plus left bumper. But there you go. But once you have your controls and hotkeys set, I'm going to take you through a couple things here. So to launch a game from our games list, and then we just need to select a game and tell it to run. So we're going to do Burnout 3 here. So here we are within Burnout 3. And as you can see, it runs really awesome under emulation now. There's not as many glitches as there used to be thanks to the latest PCSX2 updates. But if you ever come across a game that seems to have issues with hardware renderer, you can change over to the software renderer at any time. So if you set a hotkey for that, you can use that, or you could use your in-game menu, go down and tell it to switch to the software renderer. And the software renderer will always have the most accurate graphics. It doesn't run at higher resolutions, unfortunately. But again, this is kind of a failsafe if you run into games that just are not behaving graphically. But you can always go back and forth at any time. But again, at any point, you could always go into your in-game menu, and there's a lot of different options available here. So you could go in, you could change per game properties, look at available retro achievements if you're logged in and have these up. Take screenshots, and if you're doing a multi-disc game, you can change discs by going in here, and it'll take you automatically into your set games list folder for you to change discs with. And of course, you could always go into settings and change your XBSX 2.0 settings. And then at any point, you could go down to close game, and you could tell it to exit with a save state or exit without saving to choose a different game from your games list. So now let's go ahead and do that multi-tap demo here. And we're going to choose Time Splitters 3, or we're going to choose Time Splitters 2, because it's a good one. So there you can see that it is now detecting all three of my controllers. But as you can see, we are now playing Time Splitters 2 in 3-player split screen with the multi-tap. Everything is working exactly as expected. I cannot control 3 players at the same time, unfortunately, but there you go. So as you can see, we now have XBSX 2.0 all set up, ready to play games in its most basic capacity with multiplayer support. So awesome, awesome stuff. So from this point on in the video, we're going to be covering more advanced options within XBSX 2.0. So let's go ahead and get started. So back on the main menu of XBSX 2.0, we're going to head into the settings menu and start covering some of the options that are available to us. So under settings, our first option is interface settings. So we're going to go ahead and leave inhibit screensaver turned on. Next option, pause on start. You can enable this if you want to. Not sure what use it is unless you're trying to get like the very first frame of a game starting. Pause on focus loss isn't important on Xbox. We can't exactly lose focus on the emulator. Now another one that you might be interested in is pausing emulation on a controller disconnect. So for example, if you're playing a game, have to step away, and you didn't pause it for whatever reason, if the controller disconnects, it will pause emulation. So you can enable this if you want. Pause on menus, so this will pause the emulated game when you go into your home menu. Confirm shutdown, this will ask you if you really want to quit your emulator. I personally don't need to be asked that. I'm telling it to quit, so I want it to quit. The next option automatically creates a save state on quitting out of the emulator, so if you want to use that option, it is available to you. Save state backups are automatically created when they're made, so you can enable or disable this option. Then we can use a light theme if you would like to have a light theme instead of dark theme. Next up, we have more on-screen display messages, so we could change the size of these messages. You can choose whether or not they will appear. And then you can change what other things appear during your emulation. So if you want to see the speed at which your emulation is running, you can toggle this one, FPS, CPU, GPU usage, resolution, GS statistics, status indicators. You can show the current settings that are running. If you're a streamer and like to show inputs, you can show those here. Frame time graphs, and then warnings about unsafe settings. So personal preference on what you want to have appear. Then at the very bottom there is a reset settings to reset everything but your controller settings. Now pressing right bumper, this brings us to our BIOS settings screen. We've already gone over this, we don't need to go over it again. Next up, emulation settings. So speed control, normal speed, this is set to 100% by default, so 60 FPS gameplay. So I really don't recommend changing this at all. It'll just mess up your default emulation, unless you really want to see what it looks like if you're running things slower or faster. This doesn't actually increase frames per second. It's just essentially a fast forward or slowdown. But fast forward speed, you can change this to be 120 FPS, or you can try to get it to go as fast as possible. But 200 is a pretty good double speed activation. Then you can set slow motion speed. Next up, EE cycle rate. So this is to overclock or underclock the emulated PS2 CPU. So for any games that might be too demanding for the Xbox Series X or S, you can lower this speed to make it so that the game is playing at full speed, but you give up some FPS as a result. Or if there's a game that was too demanding on PS2 hardware and has slowdowns, you can overclock the emulated CPU to smooth out those frame rates. It is far more demanding on the hardware, so results aren't always guaranteed, but it is a great option to have. Next up, EE cycle skipping, leave this on normal. Very few games can take advantage of this. Enable multi-threading, leave this one on. Thread pinning isn't an option we really need to worry about on Xbox. Next up is cheats, but we're going to go over this in a dedicated section in a moment, so we'll just go ahead and leave this off for now. Enable host file system. We're not going to need this on Xbox. Now enable C DVD pre-caching. If you want to load your entire game image into RAM before the game starts, you can enable this option. It will help with any glitching or stuttering that occurs due to slower storage mediums. So if you're using an external hard drive instead of a thumb drive or SSD, this might be a good one to enable. Now we have some latency options here. So maximum frame latency, you can choose between 0, 1, 2, 3 frames. But I like to just go down here and turn on optimal frame pacing. Sets the maximum frame latency to 0 frames. Helps with input latency, but can cause increased performance requirements, but on Xbox Series X and S should be good for most things. Vertical sync, leave this enabled to prevent any screen tearing. And then we also have an option here to sync to host refresh rate, and this will adjust emulation speed to match the refresh rate of the display you're using, so it can increase or decrease speed to get a more accurate refresh rate. So personal preference if you want to try this one out or not. All right, next tab, we have graphics settings. So under renderer, leave this one set to automatic. Aspect ratio, this is set to auto 4:3, 3:2 by default, but you can force it to 4:3 or 16:9 or stretch your games. Then you can set an FMV aspect ratio, same options are available. Then we have de-interlacing. Just go ahead and leave this one on automatic. It does a good enough job of selecting the proper de-interlacer for different titles, but you have different options of weave, bob, blend, and adaptive. Then you can choose screenshot sizes, so screen resolution, so whatever your Xbox's resolution is set to will be the screenshot resolution. Then you can change the format, quality, and stretching, as well as crops along any different edges. Next up, we have enable widescreen patches and no interlacing patches. We're going to go over those in a dedicated section with cheats, so we'll just skip over those for now. Next, we have bilinear upscaling. So when you up-res your games, it applies a bilinear upscale, and you can choose whether or not you want that to be smoother or sharper, or disable it entirely. Recommend leaving it on just to help with uneven pixel scaling, but you can choose whether or not you like it more smooth or sharper. Next up, we have integer upscaling. So this will perfectly pixel scale our game, so I like to use this option. It will result in black borders on most games, but I like the sharper output it provides. So personal preference if you want to use this. Next up, screen offsets. So you can enable this one, see if you like the effects it gives your games or not. And then you could also enable the overscan area of different games if desired. Again, personal preference. Anti-blur, this is on by default. Makes PS2 games appear more sharp, but it is less accurate to how the games actually were on the original hardware, so personal preference if you want to leave that one on or turn it off. Next, we have our internal resolution. So XBSX 2.0 is set to 1080p by default. You could go ahead and crank this up to 1440p or 4K for most things without any issue. If you get lag where you didn't have it before, just go ahead and lower the quality back down. Next up, bilinear filtering. So this is set to bilinear PS2 by default, and I like to leave it there for accuracy's sake, but other options are available for you to try. Next up, trilinear filtering. This is set to automatic by default, but you can also force it into a PS2 mode or turn it off, your preference. Anisotropic filtering, you can crank this up to 16x to improve texture filtering. Next up, dithering. So this is unscaled by default, and so you can try it with your games to see if you like it scaled or forced 32-bit. Next up, blending accuracy. This is set to basic. And this is the recommended setting. Some games might require it to go higher, and you can set that on a per game basis if needed, but never go to full or maximum. It will affect gameplay speed. Next up, texture preloading. Go ahead and leave this on full, and then mip mapping, leave this on. Next, we have texture replacements. We'll go ahead and cover these in a dedicated section in a moment as well. So skipping down to post-processing, we could turn on full screen anti-aliasing, and then skipping down to filters, we could turn on shade boost to change our brightness, contrast, and saturation. And then we also have a selection of TV filters available. So for example, simple scanline filters or a CRT filter if you want to have a slightly more authentic experience. But with the TV shaders, it'd be best to lower the internal resolution a bit to really take advantage of them to kind of get a more authentic PS2 experience. So for example, if we just crank this back down to like native for a moment, go into our games list here, we get a nice CRT filter on top of our PS2 emulation, and it looks fantastic even now. even though it is set to a much lower internal resolution. So personal preference if you want to use that or not. But moving on to the next tab, audio control, so you can set your output volume as well as the fast forward volume. So if you want to have no audio while fast forwarding where it's going to be all glitched out anyway, you could just go ahead and turn this down. Choose to mute all sounds. Next up, backend settings, audio backend, leave this one alone. Expansion, this is disabled by default, but you could change it to 5.1, 7.1, depending on your audio system. I only have a stereo system, so I haven't tried this. Next up, synchronization, it's recommended to leave this as time stretch. Next, you can adjust the buffer sizes, output latency, and then you can also enable minimal output latency. But anyway, moving on to the next tab, memory cards, we kind of covered this already. So you can create new memory cards at will, and then you can enable or disable slot 1, slot 2 memory cards, eject the card, change them over to a new one anytime you need. Next up, our controller tab. We went over this before for the multiplayer options. But again, you can enable or disable multitaps as needed. And then change your controller types, automatic mappings, or manually remap anything as needed. Next up, hotkeys. Again, already covered these, but this is where you change any hotkeys for all of the massively available options. Next up, retro achievements. So if you want to get retro achievements while you're playing PS2 games on XBSX 2.0, you can do so. Just toggle on the enable achievements option. And then you can turn on or turn off hardcore mode, achievement notifications, leaderboard notifications, have an unlock sound effect. The in-game overlays can be turned on or off. And then down here at the bottom, you can log in. So you just put in your username and password. And when you get logged in, it'll pop up that you're logged in and it's now ready to go. And then our final page here is folder settings. So we covered this near the start of the video, so we don't really need to go over it again. And our last page here, we really don't need to mess with. Just leave this one alone. Not really worth our time. But for example of those retro achievements real quick, so we can load up Ace Combat Zero here. I've been working on this game quite a bit. But you can see it pops it up right there. Ace Combat Zero, hardcore mode. I have 90 out of 120 of the retro achievements for this game. But that covers our basic settings menu. So again, we're going to go over cheats and widescreen patches, 60F patches, and no de-interlacing patches in a moment. But if we go to our games list, we can also adjust per game settings as we see fit. So on any game, if you press Y to open up the launch options, you could press A on the game properties. And it gives us just some basic information about the game. But if we go through with our right bumper, you can see that we can change settings on a per game basis. So if there's games, for example, that don't work as well. So if there's games you want to have run at internal resolution with scan lines versus ones you don't, you can set that in here. You can set game specific memory cards if needed, game specific controls. So all those options are available to you. But let's go ahead and talk about widescreen hacks, no interlace patches, and cheats. So we're going to go ahead and close out of XBSX 2.0 for a moment. And we're going to move our USB drive back over to a computer. So back over on our computer, we've got our Xbox USB drive pulled up here. Just going to open up the XBSX 2.0 folder. So we're going to start with our widescreen patches and no de-interlacing patches. So the original App X that we installed XBSX 2.0 with has these patches built into it, but we don't have access to them right off the bat. So you need to extract the App X bundle to get access to them. So you might need to download 7-zip to get this to work, but essentially you just select it and tell it to extract. And its extracted contents will look something like this, but under the resources folder, you will now see a patches.zip. So we need to get this extracted. And inside are a number of PNAC files for various games that give them widescreen and no de-interlace patches. So we're just going to go ahead and cut all of these and add them to the patches folder we created on our USB drive earlier. And then just wait for it to do its thing. And there we go. All those patches are now moved into our patches folder, so we can now use them on XBSX 2.0. But with that, we're finally done with this actual original XBSX 2.0 download, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete it now. Now, as for regular cheats, one of the best places I found to grab codes is from gamehacking.org. Go to their PlayStation 2 section. Link to this will be in the description below. But go ahead and find a game that you want to get cheats for. So I'm going to demo Ace Combat 5 here once again. But make sure that you are choosing your proper region. Codes are not cross-region compatible. So if you have an NTSCU version of the game, you need an NTSCU version of the cheat code. If you have a PAL version of the game, you need a PAL version. But anyway, Ace Combat 5, I have an NTSC copy. So there we go. Going to select that. And you can see which cheats are available if needed. Not really super important, but anyway. Up at the top right, you will see that there is a download box here. And under Format, we need to make sure that we have a PCSX2.pnac file available. And then under File Name, you could choose any of the options. We're going to have to rename it anyway, but just go ahead and click on Download, and it will download that PNAC file for you. Now that we have our PNAC file downloaded, we just need to get it renamed with our game's CRC32 code. Now, one of the easiest ways to find your game's CRC32 name is to just load up XBSX 2.0 with your USB drive reattached, and then just press X to change the view, and you can see that it gives you your CRC code right there on the right. So just write these down as needed. That way you can apply them to your cheat lists. Alright, so here was that CRC32 code for Ace Combat 5. So just going to go ahead and rename this right there. And now we can drag it into our cheats folder within our XBSX 2.0 folder. Now, one of the greatest things about the latest versions of PCSX2 and by extension XBSX 2.0, we don't have to manually edit which cheats are on and off in this file anymore. It is very nice. It's all handled through the app. But once you have all of your cheat codes in place, you can go ahead and close out of your USB drive, move it back over to your Xbox, and I'll show you how to get these enabled. So now back over on our Xbox, we can get loaded back into XBSX 2.0 once that USB drive has been detected. We're going to head into the games list, and we're going to use Ace Combat 5 as our demo. So go ahead and press Y for launch options. Now press A on game properties. And now when we press right bumper to head over to the patches screen, we can see that there are now patches we can apply for no interlacing and widescreen 16:9. So these weren't available before, but now that we've extracted that patches folder, they are available. And pressing right bumper one more time brings us over to the cheats menu, and you can see that we now have cheats available to enable thanks to that PNAC file that we added. So just going to head down here. We're going to turn on, here we go, infinite missile and special weapons ammo. Those are good to demo for Ace Combat 5. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and launch the game now. And we can see that game database patches have been activated. And the game is now in widescreen. So Ace Combat 5 does have a built-in anamorphic widescreen mode, but these patches help make it look a little bit cleaner. Alright, so here we are inside of Ace Combat 5. And so we turned on codes for infinite missiles and special weapons. So as you can see, as we fire missiles, the counter is not going down. And same thing for our special weapons. So those codes have taken effect. We are able to just mash these as much as we want without reducing our ammo count. So nice and convenient. Very happy that they have made it so we don't have to manually edit these codes anymore. It makes it so much nicer to use. If you would like more information on no interlacing codes, the PCSX2 forums have a dedicated thread for it, so you can check this out, see if there's any more available that might not be in the current build. And then the same thing can apply to the widescreen game patches as well. Lots of resources are available within the PCSX2 forums. So I will have links to both of these down in the description below. Now let's go ahead and talk about 60 FPS codes. So over on the PCSX2 forums, there is a 60 FPS codes forum topic. Link will be in the description below. But it has links to a number of available 60 FPS codes for PS2 games. So one of my favorites is for Need for Speed Underground. The PS2 version of this game runs at 30 FPS and it just sucks compared to all the other ones. But you are able to get a 60 FPS code for this game to make it vastly improved. So it gives us the code in a raw format. So we could just go ahead and copy this or save it for later. So the easiest way to get these codes added into our PNAC files is to just have a pre-existing one. So for example, for Need for Speed Underground, I'm going to head back to gamehacking.org, go to the ends here, and find Need for Speed Underground. So I'm just going to go here. Nope, need the previous one. There we go. All right, so here we go. Need for Speed Underground. So here is the NTSCU one. That's the one I need. Gonna go ahead and change the format to PCSX 2 PNAC file. Just gonna choose Need for Speed Underground for the file name since I'm gonna have to change it later anyway. So I'm just gonna tell it to download. So now just gonna open up a notepad editor here, drag the cheat files in, and now we're going to add in our new code. So we're going to do bracket, name it 60 FPS, close bracket, and now under author, we can add in the name of who posted it. If desired, you can just leave it blank. Don't have to add that. But anyway, author equals description equals and then patch. So we're just going to copy the information from this one real quick. And we're going to delete the values between here and the ones at the end here. And this is where we're going to add in the raw code itself. So here we go. Here was that Need for Speed Underground 60 FPS code again. So just going to copy this again since I copied the name before. And now we need to paste the first set of the code in between these two commas. And then the second half of the code goes on the back end. So it all matches up to what you see down below. And then we could just save the PNAC file. Now we'll open up our Xbox's USB drive, cheats folder, and we'll get it renamed after the CRC32 code. And so thankfully they have the CRC32 code here listed right here for Need for Speed Underground, so we could just use this. But again, you can easily find it by doing that XBSX 2.0 game view I showed you earlier. But we're going to go ahead and rename the PNAC file. Add it in. And now we'll move back over to the Xbox to give you a quick demo. So this is what Need for Speed Underground looks like on PS2 through XBSX 2.0 by default. And now let's go ahead and enable all of our patches and 60 FPS codes that are now available. So once again, games list, press Y, game properties, press A. Head over and press right bumper to go over to the patches page. And so it turns out Need for Speed Underground actually has a built-in 60 FPS patch now, so whoops. Regardless, the information is still valid. But anyway, so you can turn on the widescreen patches and 60 FPS patches if they are available for your game. And if you have to add in the cheat codes like I showed, you can just go over to the cheats section, turn it on, and then you can enable the 60 FPS patch in here if needed. So we don't want to enable it twice because I didn't realize that it had been added into the game patch in the patches folder. So my bad. Regardless, the information's still good, so that's how you would do it. But anyway, now let's go ahead and show you what it looks like running in 60 FPS. And so here it is, Need for Speed Underground with the 60 FPS patch enabled, and you can see that it just runs a heck of a lot smoother, looks a lot better in motion, and it just feels way better to play as well. I honestly would not have finished my Retro Achievement run of this game if it hadn't been for the 60 FPS patch. The later parts of the game just run absolutely horrendous without a 60 FPS patch. But it is also worth noting that 60 FPS patches do dramatically increase the system requirements for the PS2 games that they are applied to, so you may run into some performance issues while using them on more demanding titles. So do be aware of that and plan accordingly. But now let's go ahead and move on to HD texture packs. So just go ahead and close out of XBSX 2.0 once again. And then move your USB drive over to your PC. It's been a while since PCSX 2 has added HD texture pack support, but unfortunately there's still really no centralized resource for finding it. But one of the better resources is GBA Temp. They have a PCSX 2 HD texture pack group, and it has a number of different threads available with in-progress texture packs or complete texture packs. And you can go through this to find games that have HD texture packs that you wish to use. So for example, Panda Venom has made a number of HD texture packs for PS2 games. And then there is also some available by CC Chrysalid. So again, tons available. So you'll just need to source ones that you want to use. So I see that there is now a Need for Speed Underground PS2 HD texture pack, and why not? Let's try it out. Let's get it downloaded. But anyway, once you get an HD texture pack downloaded, just get it extracted if it's compressed. And inside the folder, you should find a folder that is just named after the game code. So for Need for Speed Underground, SLUS20811. And inside that folder should be a number of replacement textures. But anyway, we just need to copy this folder into our textures folder on our USB drive. So go ahead and get your Xbox USB drive pulled up. Open up your XBSX 2.0 folder, the textures folder, and add in, again, the game code folder, just like so. I'm going to also grab this Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition one here. Alright, so just going to get this one extracted as well. Alright, so inside that folder, game code folder, drop it right in. And there we go. So just go ahead and repeat this process for any additional HD texture packs you wish to load up. But once you have everything that you want to have, just go ahead and move back over to your Xbox. So back over on the Xbox, once the USB drive is detected, go ahead and launch into XBSX 2.0. And I like to enable HD texture packs on a per game basis. So once again, inside the games list, well, go ahead and start with Need for Speed Underground again, because why not? So press Y to go to Launch Properties, Game Properties, and we are going to head over to the Graphics Settings tab here with our right bumper. And we're going to change up the internal resolution this time. We were running it at native resolution still, but we're going to go up to 4x native resolution. And now under texture replacement, we're going to enable this option. We're going to turn on asynchronous texture loading. We're going to skip over pre-cache replacements because we have asynchronous on. And then I'm also going to turn off this CRT filter we were using previously. That way we can take advantage of everything this texture pack has to offer. But anyway, now that we've done that, we can go ahead and start the game. So here we are in Need for Speed Underground with our HD texture pack enabled. This one is more of a slight AI upscaling, so it's a bit harder to notice, which is why I set that hotkey earlier, so you can see the dynamic difference. So here it is with it enabled, and here was the original native textures as they appear without it. So again, this is without, this is with. You can see that everything gets a bit more sharp on this pack. So that's pretty cool. Adds a nice layer of sharpness to the game that didn't exist before. So really appreciate that, especially considering this is probably the weakest graphically version of the game. But you can see some nice detail difference in the windows right in front of me in that building. So pretty cool stuff. So combine that with the 60 FPS patch, and everything just has a whole new coat of paint on it for the PS2 version. I freaking love it. But anyway, let's check out Devil May Cry 3 here. So same deal, press Y, go into Game Properties. Turn on a widescreen patch, but under renderer, let's go ahead and up the internal resolution on this one again as well. And then under texture replacement, turn on load textures, asynchronous textures, and then need to turn off that CRT filter. There we go. Alright, so here we are inside Devil May Cry. So this is with the texture pack enabled and widescreen cheat. So looking pretty sharp. So if we disable the pack, we can see that things get a bit more blurry. Again, this is just an AI upscaled pack. It's not like a complete custom pack, which are available for a number of games. So not as dramatic a difference on these ones, but still provides enough of a sharpening effect that I really enjoy it. So there you go. You can see that it just does a pretty good job of providing an extra layer of perceived detail. But that is the process of running HD texture packs on XBSX 2.0 on your Xbox Series X or S. So again, find the kind of packs you want to use and just make the experience your own. Now, for those of you looking to play your PS2 games online through private servers, there are a good number of PS2 games whose online functionality has been restored. Now, there are a number of different methods that some of these games might require, and I will go over SOCOM 2 in more specifics in a bit, but for an overwhelming majority of games, you only have to enter in a custom network profile either in the game itself or if the game uses Sony's Universal system, it makes it a lot easier. So for example, let's load up Star Wars Battlefront 2 here. Under multiplayer, we could choose internet connection as our connection type, and we'll be notified that we have no network configuration file available. So we're just going to press OK, and we're going to press square, which is our X button on an Xbox controller, to add or edit a profile. This will load up the Sony network thing here. So we're going to click on Add Settings. Now please take a second to read over this long note that I have just pasted onto your screens here, because it is important to note for online play. And we're going to choose memory card slot 2. So if you remember back in the beginning of this video, we made memory card 1 a folder, so that way we didn't have to worry about running out of save game space. And we have memory card 2 as a standard 8 megabyte memory card for network configuration files. So memory card slot 2, and you might get a notification that it's not formatted, so just go ahead and tell it to format now. Yes, it's good. All right, cool. But anyway, now just go ahead and press right. We're going to choose our emulated Ethernet adapter. We don't need that, so not required. IP setup auto is good, so leave it at that. And now for DNS server, we're going to click on manual and enter in the DNS server we need for this game. Now, to figure out which DNS servers you need for various PS2 games, the official list of PlayStation 2 online games spreadsheet is going to be your best friend. So link to this will be in the description below, but you can see which games have working online functionality and which DNS address they need. So again, some games have specific DNS addresses that you need. So for example, Battlefield 2 here. Otherwise, it'll just tell you if it needs Christian, PS Rewired, Bob's, just any number of things. So if we scroll down to Star Wars Battlefront 2, there it is. And again, these are region specific, so pay attention to that. But Star Wars Battlefront 2, this can use the Christian or Star Wars Battlefront Spy DNS number. So down here at the bottom, we have the DNS numbers list. And so for Christian, it is 45.7.228.197. Or for Star Wars Battlefront Spy, it's 688514.80. And that's just as of making this video. These numbers change, unfortunately. So just pay attention to what the number is when you're going through the process. But I'm going to go ahead and set this one up as the Christian DNS server because it's used in a vast majority of titles. So just going to insert this number in that network setup screen we saw earlier. So again, this was primary DNS. We're going to change this to 45. And again, pay attention to what the numbers are at the time you're doing it. Just don't copy what you see on the screen. And 197. All right, there we go. And there was nothing for the secondary, so we can leave that alone. And it will perform a connection test to make sure everything connects. Test was successful, so now we can save the settings. And now name it after the DNS server that you are connecting to. So we're going to name this one Christian. And there we go. So now we can just press A to save the settings. And they will now be saved. And so now we can just press B to go back out to the game. So now back on the main menu of Star Wars Battlefront 2, if we go back into multiplayer, pick our connection type internet, it should see our network configuration file on slot 2, but it looks like Battlefront 2 only reads it from slot 1, so I'm just going to make it again on slot 1, I guess, so yay. 1 second. Alright, anyway, now under multiplayer, internet, we can see our Christian DNS server is there, so we just press A to select it, and then wait for it to connect. Then press A to accept. And then you don't need to create a GameSpy ID for Battlefront 2. And there we go. Now we can see the servers that are currently available, but it doesn't look like anyone is actually online on this version anymore, so that's fine, but we could still join the server. But there we go. We are now playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 PS2 version online through the Xbox Series X and S. Now again, you might need to do some of these on a game-by-game basis if they don't use Sony's network information file. So for example, Tony Hawk 3, you can head into network play. Set up your player name. Hardware setup, network adapter for PS2, Ethernet. Advanced options. Use defaults no. Primary master server. And again, we're going to use our official list of PS2 online games for this. So we're going to find Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. And so this one again uses Christian or Bob's. So under the DNS numbers, we can do either one. So we're going to go ahead and go with Christian again. So as of this video, that is 4.5. All right, so as of this video, that's 4.5.7.228. .197 and done. So now we can save the settings. And done. So now we'll go into network play. Choose between internet or LAN. So we'll go on internet. And we can see all of the various lobbies available. So we're going to go ahead and choose West Coast. And we're going to start a server. Sure, we'll start a server. And there we go. So it's in free skate until someone would join my server, but I don't expect anyone to for this video demonstration, but you can see that the functionality is here and it does work. Now, other games might require a cheat code to bypass DNAS authorization to connect online, and one of these games is Metal Gear Online. So finding the Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence tab here, you can see that it's highlighted in yellow, requiring a DNAS section here. So if we just scroll to the right on this page, and Metal Gear Solid 3, you can see that DNAS replacement, it is needed for the US version of the game, whichever friggin' cell this was on. So it's needed for US and Europe, not for Japan. And then under the game notes, you can see requires an original version of the game plus DNAS bypass code. And so under this section, there is DNAS bypass code or custom code. And so there's a PCSX2 part and a console part. So unfortunately, there isn't a pre-made one for PCSX2 for us to use. So when this is the case, you could download the .cheat file that is provided on the PS2 hardware section and take the raw cheat code from that file and manually add it into a cheat file for your XBSX 2.0 install, as I showed you with the 60 FPS patches earlier. So I'm going to refer you back to that on how to add in raw cheat codes to your PNAC files. But for Metal Gear Online, the Save MGO site actually has a pre-made PNAC file for you to add to your XBSX 2.0 install. So if you click on the DSN numbers here, under MGO, you have the website for Save MGO. So we could just go directly to this site. And under the Cheats tab here, it has our disabled DNAS code, as well as the other codes we need to get online. And you could select which cheat code format you need this in. So we could select our region between NTSU, NTSJ, PAL. So we're going to select NTSU for me here. So English and Spanish. And then we're going to choose PCSX2 and click on Save. And that gives us a properly named PNAC file to work with XBSX 2.0. Now, if you're using another cheats file for the game in question already, you need to merge them into a single PNAC file. Otherwise, you will get conflicts. But from here, just go ahead and get your Xbox's USB drive hooked up to your PC so you can copy this PNAC file into your cheats folder. So here we go, XBSX 2.0, cheat codes. We're just going to drag that right on in. There we go. So now we can get this moved back over to the Xbox and get set up for Metal Gear Online. So with that drive detected, load into XBSX 2.0. Games list. And this is Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence Disc 2 that we need to use. So we're going to go press Y for launch options, game properties. We can activate a widescreen hack if desired. Now under cheats, we could turn this on. And these codes weren't labeled, so they don't show up in the activation list very nicely, but you can see 24 unlabeled patch codes will automatically activate. So that's pretty much all we need here. So we could go back into the games list and load up Disc 2. And unfortunately, I have hardcore mode online for retro achievements, so hold on one second. But anyways, now we are here on the main menu of Disc 2 for Metal Gear Solid. So we are going to go into online mode. Now on the start menu, we're going to go down to play using detailed settings. And we're going to go into network settings. And we're going to go to edit network configuration file. Click on yes. Save game settings, yes. And we're going to choose slot 2. And we're going to go through the process of adding another DNS server for the Save MGO DNS. So add setting. And it changes the button mapping depending on the game. So this is using circle is okay. Okay. So we're going to choose slot 2. Choose our network adapter, not required. Auto for IP, manual for DNS. And now we're going to put in the DNS server for Save MGO. So again, the official list of PlayStation 2 online games, DNS tab, MGO. So as of this video, it is 142.171.43.167. So we're just going to get that entered in. And there was no secondary DNS for this one, so we could just move over to the connection test. And I'm going to name this one MGO. And then we could just go ahead and quit back out to the game. Now on the start menu, we could go to first time, agree, memory card slot 2 for our MGO network setting, hit agree, and now you just need to create a new account if you don't already have one, so you can type in a username, and then a password, and confirm the password. and then you can set it to save the password, and then you can choose a player name. And once you have everything, just press OK. And when you get the notification that your account was created, it'll log into the server. And then you can connect to any of the available lobbies that happen to be online. And there we go. We are now playing Metal Gear Solid 3's Metal Gear Online 1. Now, for anyone looking to play SOCOM 2 online specifically, it requires an in-game patch to work. So by going into the DNS number site, you can go to the PS Rewired site here. And under the Getting Started tab, you can click on SOCOM 2. And it'll say things you need, a one-time patch needed to download the R004 update. And there's a little downloads in bracket here that you click on to get the ELF file needed to get this to run. So just click on this to get it downloaded. Now get your Xbox's USB drive hooked up to your computer, and you can add the ELF file into your PS2 Games folder or anywhere else you really want. It shouldn't matter a whole lot, but it's easier if it's just in the same folder as your SOCOM 2 disk. Once placed, go ahead and move back over to the Xbox. Once the drive is detected, open up XBSX 2.0. And now we're going to click on Start Game instead of our games list, and we're going to choose Start File. Now we're going to click on Parent Directory until we get to our root drives. Go to E for USB. Go into our Games folder. Navigate to our PS2 Games folder. And we're going to find that ELF file. So here it is, R0004v002.elf. And we're going to launch this. And you'll see some text up in the right there. And when you're brought back to the PS2 browser screen, you're going to go into your in-game menu. And we're going to click on Change Disk. Now we're going to click on Parent Directory. Go to our E drive, Games folder, PS2 Games folder. And we're going to choose our SOCOM 2 game disk. And once the disk is showing, just go ahead and select it. And it's worth noting you cannot do this with the PS3's PS2 BIOS file since it doesn't have the browser. This needs to be done with an original console BIOS. Now for memory card slot, you can choose slot 1 or slot 2 for now. Now on the main menu, we're going to go to Online. And we're going to change the memory card over to slot 2. And we're going to edit the network configurations to get us one that's specific for SOCOM, SOCOM 2, SOCOM 3. So under the network settings, we're going to go to Add Setting. Going to choose memory card slot 2. Choose our Ethernet adapter. Not required. Automatic for IP. And now under our DNS, manual. And for SOCOM 2, it uses PS Rewired. So the DNS server is as listed here. Again, just put in what it lists on the spreadsheet at the time you do this. So that DNS is 67 for me. 222. 156. $250. And secondary is blank, so we can move on. And we will rename this one. And we'll go ahead and save the settings. And then we'll quit back to the game. Alright, so once again, we're going to choose slot 2 for our internet connection settings. It's already got PS Rewired selected, so we're going to tell it to log in. Now we're going to select SOCOM 2 R0004. And it will ask us to download the latest patch for SOCOM 2, so tell it to download now. And for the patch, going to choose slot 1. And A to restart SOCOM 2. And now when asked for memory card slot, make sure you are choosing slot 1 for that patch to apply. And with the patch downloaded, you will now see that SOCOM 2 R0004 is there at the bottom of the screen instead of it being R0001. So now when we go to the online game, and we can log in with our credentials on slot 2 there, can head into the SOCOM 2 R0004 servers. And then you could just create an account and password and tell it to connect. But now you can just join a server room and then find online games. So it doesn't look like anyone is playing online at the moment. Or no, we are. Here we go. So 14 people playing in this one. But there we are, SOCOM 2 online, and there are a good number of people still playing this one even today. So you should be able to find some good games to relive SOCOM 2's glory days. And as one final note, anytime you want to launch SOCOM 2 after this point, you do not need to launch it through that ELF file. You could launch it directly from the game disk. But with that, we're finally going to call it for this exceptionally long XBSX 2.0 video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope this helps you get your XBSX 2.0 experience up and running to your desires on your Xbox Series X or S. But here at the end, the usual favors to ask. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit that like-dislike button depending on how much you like today's tutorial, as well as that sub button and notification bell so you can see when new videos go live on the channel. Loads of content always coming your way, and I'd love to have each and every one of you along for the ride. For anyone interested in further helping support the channel and keep it going, please be sure to check out that join button here on YouTube or that Patreon link in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, as every little bit helps keep us going. Big shout out to all of our current backers. Thank you so much for believing in what we do here and helping us keep it going for so long. You are amazing. Couldn't do it without you. But until next time, my wonderful internet peeps, you all stay awesome, keep on gaming, and we'll see you back next video.